Excellent.
So Fred, speaking of amazing stuff, we have these amazing vaccines now.
Right.
But what is the deal with the supply chain and getting them in people's arms? We've heard a lot of bad stuff about that lately. So there's two things I want to talk to you about today. One
Yes.
is the vaccine distribution. The other one is this more contagious strain. Where is that, and how do we fight that?
Yeah, I actually saw Fred this morning when I dropped something off, and he told me my mask wasn't going to be much good with this new strain, which is
Oh boy.
not something that any of us wanted to hear. But why don't we start with that, and then we'll go into the vaccine schedule.
Yeah. So the new strain. Now, that's not to say don't wear your mask. Masks are really critical. But what I did say is there are typical distancing uh, kind of practices that we think are okay today, will not be in the future.
Oh boy.
Yeah. So if you're used to going to Myers during crowded times and standing in line, to buy some beer at the local place, man, be really careful. This new vaccine's in Washtenaw County. We've identified it. It's the B117 variant. I was on a special committee in the UK in December about this, and these guys are running scared. These are epidemiologists who've seen it all, right? We work in tropical medicine all the time. We've seen Ebola, we've seen Zika. This thing really scared them. The reason that it did, we went over a little bit at one point, and we can go into more detail if you like. But the variants have two big characteristics. The first big characteristic is that they are much more transmissible than the current Wuhan virus. What happens with these viruses is actually they grow and then they die out, and they grow and die out. So the Wuhan virus, the original variant that we got in on the West Coast, actually already was supplanted pretty quickly by a European variant that was more transmissible. And so by the time we got to kind of March, April, most of this what we were fighting wasn't even the Chinese variant of the virus anymore. And what's happened in the UK was they were fighting the kind of variants that we were fighting, and suddenly they noticed a huge uptick. So they went into massive shutdown. I'm not talking about the shutdowns that Governor Whitmer put in place. I'm talking about shutdowns that included no more shopping, stay in your homes, under all circumstances, no more than 4 people at dinner, and that should be in your immediate family only, curfews after 8 p.m. We're talking about a real shutdown, right? That happened about the same time Governor Whitmer's shutdown occurred on November 17th. I think they went in October 30th, as I recall, the Britons saw this. And what happened was the virus stopped, and they said, celebration, we're through, we've succeeded, and the virus started going down, and all of a sudden they saw this huge uptick, and they said, what's wrong? We're still at full curfew where everyone's wearing masks. We've got the best possible protection, and their hospitals are being completely overrun in London and in Edinburgh and in Glasgow and all the major cities. And they couldn't figure it out. And luckily, they've got a very strong genetic sequencing operation in Britain. Britain sequences more genes of the virus than anybody else in the world. They do about 150,000 a year on average. We're doing about 50,000. So we're about, and of course, they've got 1/5 the population we do. So if you think about that, they're sequencing about 7.4% of all the sequences that come of all the positive tests that come in. They sequence those 7.4. We're at 0.3%. So we have no idea what the total we have no idea what we're fighting anymore, right? We're flying blind. Well, they weren't flying blind, and they saw right away that there's a new variant, and this new variant is about 70% more infectious. So the old masks that you're used to wearing and you're putting on now, and sometimes you wear them and sometimes you don't, and sometimes your nose is covered, sometimes they aren't, and they're sort of manufactured in someone's basement, not going to cut it. You're going to have to wear a real true N95 masks from now until we get this thing under control. Right now, we think it's about 1.5% of all the things we're fighting. What's interesting is that's doubled in a week. So a week ago we were at 0.7. Now it's at 1.5. And we watch the doubling rates, right? So if you do the math, it doubles again, and you're going to be at 2, 4, 8, 16, 32%. So in 5 to 6 weeks, it'll be at 64% of everything we're fighting in the United States. That's how fast it goes.
Hmm.
And when those things got, people are just going to get surprised that I did the same stuff I did before and I got sick. How did that happen? And the answer is you're fighting something new. And it's going to be a lot harder to get rid of and a lot more devastating when it goes through the family, through communities. It's going to really move. It'll tear right through us if we don't start to up our game a lot. So people are really worried about this, and legitimately so. The other big thing is that, so we got transmissibility, 70% more transmissible. The reason is that it actually binds more closely to the ACE2 inhibitor. I'm sorry, the ACE2 site that binds. So we've got these ACE2 binding sites on all of our cells. Most of our organs do, a few exceptions, and that's where this virus binds. Well, this variant, this B1.1.7 variant, actually binds more tightly to it, and is therefore it needs less infective agent to come in, bind more tightly to your receptors, inject you with the virus, and that's how it spreads so much faster. And then when you get it, this particular variant actually causes more viral shedding and makes you more transmissible, so that when you're talking about 55% more virus in you that's shedding out to people. And luckily, we're not seeing a change in virulence with this particular change in the mutation, but we are seeing a lot more transmissibility, and the ability to infect children is a lot higher in this one. So we might see a lot more children being infected by the COVID virus as a result of this. The other big variant that we're worried about is the 1352 variant. So we have the 117 variant, and that's the one that transmits so much faster. The 1352 variant is coming out of South Africa and Brazil. So it's coming at it from both sides, right? Isn't that perfect? And the problem with this variant is that it has actually mutated in the binding site area. And the reason that's so tricky is because all of our medicines, all of our vaccines, all of our diagnostics assumed that we weren't going to have that mutation occurring, right? We said, hey, that spike protein area, that's going to have to remain pretty stable, because otherwise that thing can't infect us. Well, it's found, we've basically mapped out about 40,000 different variants. I'm sorry, 4,000 different variants that we were extremely concerned about. And within the first 9 months, we've already found one of the most concerning variants possible. This particular mutation is right in the middle of the binding site. And that means that a lot of our current tests, if we have continued mutation in those areas, our current tests, our current diagnostics, and our current vaccines and medicines will be less impactful than they are today. And we're already seeing that, unfortunately, in both the Lilly monoclonal antibody and the Regeneron monoclonal antibody. We're seeing that they're not as effective. And the plasma proteins, remember the plasma proteins that come off of sick people that were originally for the Wuhan virus, that we've saved very carefully, and then we're saying we're going to give you some of these nice antibodies. They're not nearly as effective. And people who've been given those plasma infusions in the past who were saved, that's those same patients, once they got the B1.1.7 virus, died. And so we're concerned. We're really concerned. The reason that we're concerned is that coronaviruses don't mutate that much. Compared to the flu, compared to HIV and malaria, these are kind of low grade mutating groups. And we thought we were pretty safe, right? We can keep up with the mutations. You got these technologies that map to the genome. We can watch for this. Well, the problem is where they're mutating. They're mutating right at the sites that we're most sensitive to a mutation. That's the spike protein, which actually causes the infection and what we always bind to. And we have to bind to those because that's the nature of the vaccine. You want to bind to those particular binding sites, not to other ones. Otherwise, you get adverse events. So yeah, we're worried about the fact that it's mutating in a place that we weren't expecting. And
So the vaccines then that we currently have, are they able to deal with this new strain?
we're still testing in South Africa, and we're most concerned about that one because it's happening right in the middle of what they call the binding motif, which is you've got a spike, and you've got a binding domain, and then within the domain, the most important area is the motif, and right in that area, right in the middle of it, somehow this thing is still very infective, and change right in the middle. So we're still testing. J&J has active trials in South Africa, so we're looking directly at those results in the field. We have done work like this in the laboratory, but that's not as effective, right? We're kind of seeing, okay, here's the typical kind of antibodies that are coming as a result of the vaccine. We mix those with these new variants, and so far, great news is that the variants are still being killed by the same antibodies we've got as a result of the vaccine to the Wuhan virus as this variant. So that's the good news, but we want to see that in nature, and the J&J results should tell us that in a couple of weeks, they're going to be able to close down the trial and tell us what's going on with their vaccine. That is the same antigen, as you know, that's the same antigen that's being used by both Moderna and Pfizer. So we should be in a lot better shape to be able to tell about that particular virus. That's the one we're most worried about. The 117 virus does seem to be neutralized by our current vaccines. So sorry. So that's the bad news, right? I mean, it's really bad news that not only is the virus going in the wrong direction, but it's getting more transmissible. Your old techniques have to be, really amped up. I mean, please don't go to restaurants. Please don't go to the bar. Please go to nightclubs until, because it's really going to tear right through the community if you start doing that. And wear your mask. If you can get an N95 mask, wear that. If you can distance, continue the distancing and even make it broader if you can, because this is going to be a bad one. I do have some data though. I can show you if you want. Okay. I can show you some stuff.
Sure.
The other thing you wanted to talk about vaccination rates. Let's talk about vaccination rates. So,
well, you're bringing that up. I got a new email from the U of M this morning, and they're now. I'm in Group 1C, over 65, and so now they're randomly selecting people from my age group to participate, and they'll send me an email if I've been selected.
Hey, that's great news. And so this is, I wanted to show you a couple of things. I decided to take a quick look at Michigan and a little more detail. As you know, I don't work for the state. I work for other states. I've done work for Ohio and Connecticut and California and Texas, but Michigan not. So I'm sort of an objective person when it comes to Michigan. And overall, I think that we've done some really good things. So where's a slideshow? Oop, there we go. Sorry about that. Turn this on. Here we are. So here's Michigan. And what I did is so here's what Michigan looked like, right? And people have been complaining about these shutdowns. And I was curious about whether they made sense. And I think you can see that we had one big shutdown March 16th, and that sort of carried on being on and off through this period. And you can see that March 16th, we were going up a curve, and we actually had a slightly worse situation on our hands, as you know, in April than the rest of the United States. The rest of the United States was looking better. And then we went down, and the United States had that big outbreak. You can see July, August, September. California basically was driven by California, Florida, and Arizona. And the reason was that we had a lot of people who were there were a lot of farm workers who were going undetected, going out in the fields, getting sick, spreading it in the Latin American and the Latino communities. And that kind of went under the radar for a while, and we're seeing a huge, you can see harvest season in California just drove us through the roof on that. And Michigan also went up quite a bit. You can see that there we are, the US is in blue, we're in red. And on November 17th, Governor Whitmer said, let's slow things down. We're on a bad curve. The rest of the United States did not really pursue that like we did, as strongly as we did. And you can see the rest of the United States just took off and we went down. So that was a good call. That was a really, really good call on her part right before Thanksgiving to say, let's try to hold this off. And the rest of the United States is fighting off, this now and as really in trouble in a lot of states. And you can see here's how it spread through the state of Michigan. And you can see Upper Peninsula, especially along the borders, interestingly, the Ohio-Indiana border, the Wisconsin borders. We're having a lot of trouble keeping that virus from going across the border. Once we get into our state ourselves, we're doing a pretty good job. We're in the lightest area, we're below 1 in 20 share of population with a reported case. We've had some, we've got a low population in some of these areas, and and so even one death, for example, in some of these counties up in north, in the UP, pushes us off the map in terms of the the COVID negative numbers. But overall, except along our borders, I think we're doing pretty well, right? So that's the way it looks, and we're on a downward trend. The shut-in has worked. Now, this happened in the UK as well, right? The shut-in worked in the UK. All of a sudden, we had this new variant come out, and it just went off the charts. And so what I'm worried about is that now we're relaxing a little bit, and you can see here are the things that we really have to worry about. So this isn't just me. This is 500 epidemiologists tracking where the diseases are occurring, why they've occurred, and you can see here the things that are less risky versus the things that are more risky. And as you move from the left-hand side, that's less risky. So if you want to take out food, do some exercising outdoors, go golfing, camping, outdoor dining, go to a museum. Be with your family, not a problem. Those are low risk operations. Medium risk is going on an airplane. That's even getting to high risk depending how long you're on that airplane. Visiting elderly in the home because they're more susceptible. Going bowling because a little bit of exertion plus it's inside. Exercising in the gym. Those are sort of getting cinema, movie theater. And then finally you can see the things that are really very dangerous, and we really, if you can if at all possible, avoid because of this new variant coming in. Going to nightclubs, don't do that. Nightclubs and sitting and gambling for long periods of time when you've had a couple of drinks, which is nice and relaxing. But man, it is super dangerous with this new variant. Indoor bars, indoor dining, going to a concert where you're sitting there right next to lots of different people who are over the top of you, breathing down on you. Going to sports stadiums. Even church, unfortunately, if it's indoors in a large congregation, people are singing and following along, that's going to be a challenge. Buffet dinners, don't do that. So those are the things that are really dangerous and are going to be not just dangerous today, but dangerous especially February and March timeframe. At that point, I think it will have over 50% of the variants by the end of March. Over 50% of what we're fighting is going to be something that is 70% more contagious than what we're fighting today.
Well, I suppose it can't go to the gym either. That would be a bad idea, right?
It depends. Well, if you're all by yourself and in a well-ventilated place, not a problem. So I work out downstairs. It's not nearly as fun as being in a real gym, I'll tell you. But so that it depends. You got to kind of be aware of your situation, right? If the gym is able to really ventilate and really keep people away, and they really are just serious about disinfection, and you're not, and you don't get overly exerted, and you're able to continue to wear your mask, and those are hard things to do, then it's not nearly as dangerous as if you're in a place that's enclosed without good ventilation, without people who are getting close and waiting for the machines, and breathing hard, especially things like spinning and things like, oh my gosh, just be I wouldn't go close to that. But if you can be in a place that's got plenty of distance and plenty of ventilation, and you're not near anybody and you're able to wear your mask because you're not exerting too well and they're serious about keeping surfaces clean, be super careful, but that's possible.
Okay.
But especially the ventilation, though, make sure they have HEPA filters, make sure they ventilate regularly, make sure they're getting 15 cycles of 4 cycles of air per hour. That's twice as much as your average house. All those things, if they're not doing that, then I'd stay away. And if you can't find that out, I'd stay away. But yeah, so gyms generally are challenging, unfortunately, because there are a lot of great facilities out there that, we didn't know. We couldn't put the ventilation that bad. So here's what the governor did. And she said, basically, January 13th, we're going down, things are getting better. So she's going to open up some stuff, but these things are not open. Workplaces, nightclubs, contact sports. She's opened up some of the bowling centers. She's on the edge here. My guess is she's going to have to shut those down. Sadly, I get your get your chance in, now and call it a day in the next week or two, because by that time the new variant will come out and it'll be really dangerous. The vaccination rates was the other thing that Matt I wanted to talk about, and we're not doing so well compared to the other states. We're better than California and Idaho and down south, but we're not nearly as good as, say, Connecticut, or North and South Dakota. West Virginia is doing a really good job on this as well. You can see we've vaccinated about 3.1% of our total population. We're getting into the C-level groups, which is why you were talked to, Mike, I think. You can see that we've gotten 773,750 shots injected. Those are how many doses we've actually received. We've only, though, injected 364,182 doses. So that's a 47% injection rate. And that's on that's 0.5% of the population. So we've gotten enough to, we got a ways to go.
Ways to go. Yes, sir.
Joe Biden's come out and said he wants to do 100 million doses by
100 days.
in
So it'd be
100
by
days.
Memorial Day, give or take,
By Memorial Day. Yeah, but I think that's sort of 100 days is that's right, sort of middle of April. That would be too slow. If we're at that rate, that's still too slow. We're going to have more manufacturing capability than that by that point, and I would be disappointed. That would still mean we're only injecting about 50% of the doses that we're getting, and that would be, that would mean that we haven't solved the distribution side. And you saw the challenges in production last week, Mike. We went through that. I want to talk a little bit about the challenges in distribution, if you'd like. We can talk about,
go ahead.
Right, because that's the other bottleneck. First is manufacturing. We don't have enough by definition because we're still ramping up, but we have actually manufactured so much stuff that we're overwhelming our distribution systems. And here's where we're at, right? The reason this is happening is because it is the whole supply chain is being cobbled together. We never had a supply chain that was ready for COVID. We kind of had a supply chain in place that was ready to do, control, to do the flu vaccine where you don't really have any outbreaks. Things are in control. You're just monitoring the flu shots. You're giving half the population a flu shot when they need it, and through the pharmacy. Well, this is a situation where we've got a major outbreak, a pandemic level outbreak of a real bad pathogen that's 10 times worse than the flu, much more, it's 2.5 times more transmittable, and it's 10 times more deadly. So all of a sudden we're in a completely different situation, new disease. And so we're trying to cobble together these supply chains quickly. Pfizer said, forget that. I'm just going to send everything you guys want directly to the end site vaccinator site, right? So if you're working with Pfizer out of Kalamazoo, they're shipping it right to a hospital and right to the hospital level, or right to the vaccinator site level, and all over the country. The Moderna has decided, no, they want to partner with McKesson, who's putting together the vaccinators, the actual kits, and then they send their material through McKesson to basically FedEx and UPS to a warehouse where it can be kept cold. Don't forget, Pfizer has that -70-degree cold chain, which is much harder to manage, and Moderna has this -20, which is still much worse than we usually do. Usually we're at what they call it a 2 to 8 degree centigrade, which is about refrigerate. What do you call it? It's 40 degrees or so Fahrenheit. So it's sort of what you keep your refrigerator at. When you start to get to frozen stuff, things get a lot more complicated to make sure that it remains frozen, doesn't thaw and refreeze. All those things can really make a big difference. So right now, we don't really have a supply chain that's capable of handling all the manufacturing we're doing. Second big problem is this is really regulated. Right. I mean, this is highly regulated stuff. It's got to go through qualification, certification. You've got to apply to become. You have to have the right vaccination people in place. You've got to have the right facilities in place. You've got to have all those processes in place. All the systems have to be tested out. So it's a significant problem. And if you talk to the healthcare people, they're trying to save people's lives. They're not trying to inject people with new vaccines. They're all busy trying to save. Their hospitals are getting overwhelmed. So they don't have that much capacity available to give a lot of injections. And so we have to train a lot more people to do these injections. And these injections aren't normal injections. They're very small doses that require quite a bit of precision in terms of the injector. You've got to prepare the process, the bottle appropriately. You can't shake it. You could break up the little lipid nanoparticles and so on. So there's some training that needs to go on that's quite challenging. And the vaccination process actually wastes a little bit of material, which you don't want to do either. So the better you train these people, the more material you're going to have. It only takes 30 micrograms. In other words, we could vaccinate the entire United States with a 10-gallon bucket of antigen. That's how powerful and small these doses are. When you get the vaccine, you won't believe how easy it is. I mean, we're talking about little tiny needles, very small amounts of injection. You'll enjoy that part. What'll hit you later is the reactogenicity, right? Your immune system say, hey, something's attacking. We better go after it, and that's a good sign because it means you're activating your immune system. And then about 2 days later, you'll feel you'll be a little bit tired out because your body is responding appropriately. Of course, this is the virus we're giving you. We're just giving you a little piece of the protein, and that's all you're reacting to. Then we got to change all the manufacturing all around, right? We've got a lot of new entrants coming in. We've got Moderna that has one set of requirements. Then we have Pfizer, that's another set of requirements. J&J is coming, Novavax is coming, Sanofi is coming. All these groups have slightly different requirements about how they're supposed to be shipped and handled, and that's a big challenge because they're not all going to be able to use the same infrastructure all the time. And then, of course, the logistics. We talked about this. Normally, our wastage levels for vaccines are about 20% in the United States. Overall, the world for sure, 20%, 25%. And now we got a -70 and a -20 degree cold chain, so it's going to be even worse. Plus, it turns out that Pfizer put a little bit of extra dosing in each vial, and so now people are planning for 5,000 doses to be per opened case, and now they're getting 7,000. So all of a sudden, you need an extra 2,000 people in line to get vaccinated. Which is why, if the audience is interested in getting a shot faster, they should try to fly standby, and wait at the end of the day, come by and see if some of the groups that have Pfizer vaccines, that includes Beaumont, includes Ascension. You can call and find out whether they have Pfizer vaccines, but most of the sites have Pfizer vaccines in Michigan, and that means they're going to have some extra possibly at the end of the day. And then we've got the unintegrated. The biggest problem we're having is unintegrated systems, right? These poor guys in the hospital are saying on Thursday we need to have X doses, and on Tuesday they're told, okay, you get these many doses. By that time, you've already lost half the week, and you got to really figure out, is it 1,000 doses I'm planning for, or 5,000 doses, and then getting people in line and getting ready and adjusting. So this week we're going to, I think, stop vaccinating on Tuesday and Wednesday because we didn't get quite as many doses as we thought we would. And that's disappointing, right? Because people are already in line, like you, they've been notified, you're ready to go, and then, oh, sorry, and we don't have enough doses. So that's why you can see where we started, 35 million doses of capacity in the vaccination market in the United States. That's where we started with. We want to get to 2 billion, and we think we are going to drive to 2 billion doses distributed by January 1st of 2022. In fact, Pfizer alone thinks it can get to 2 billion doses. Wow. And then you add that to Moderna, who thinks they can get to 1.2. You're starting to flow 3.2 billion doses through a supply chain with the capacity to only have 35 million doses in a year. So that's just an incredible ramp up if you think about it. And then you've got all these other things where you've got adjuvants and reagents and stoppers and needles and injectors and dry ice and all these things that have to come together at the right time at the right place, and it's complicated. So that's some of the reason that we're having some challenges with the supply chain.
Mm-hmm. Which brings me to my next question. In 2 days, Biden will be the president, and he's talking about using the Defense Production Act.
Yes. Hallelujah.
It'll probably happen. And if so, what do you think will happen? I mean, will that really ramp things up quickly or what?
Well, so we've got if you look at the dosing that's coming out, we've got 15 million doses that were shipped this last week. We've got about 35 million doses that we're going to ship this week. We got about 5 million extra doses that we're going to get out the door before Biden, and the OWS wanted to do that before Biden came to office, just to show that we've got some capacity here. They want to stress the system a little bit and push as much as they could. So we're going to start flat with Joe, and that's going to be so he's going to have to then catch up with that bolus injection, right, of all the extra people he now has to inject in 21 to 28 days. Plus, he's going to have to continue to ramp to get to the new people. So I think we're going to see it's going to go a little bit slower than we're hoping. Unfortunately, I think the Defense Production Act can help, especially in a couple of areas. One is trying to get the what they call fill and finish out the door more effectively, and getting more doses per bottle with the new vaccinators that I was talking about, the new injectors I was talking about. There's a little bit of work we can do in terms of some of the machining, some of the automation for cell culture and production. We can get a little bit more out with that. And then there's an awful lot of capability. So that's in general for the mRNA vaccines. But remember, the only people who really have that capability with mRNA are Pfizer and Moderna. So we could try to get others to to do what Moderna and Pfizer are doing, but they'd have to ramp up a new facility. It's a little bit complicated. We have to see if we can convert cell culture facilities and so on. But as you saw before, that slide I showed before, which is how complicated some of the production is. I mean, this is we're talking about this production environment where you've got to have a DNA templating capability. There are some companies that do have that capability. Unfortunately, those people are largely already working for Moderna. So Lonza has that capability. There are a few others. You can see Corden Pharma is doing their lipid nanoparticle production. There are a couple more people who have that lipid nanoproduction capability. And then they have Catalent doing the sterile piece. But sterile production and cell culture purification, it's almost black art, and it takes a long time to wrap it up, to ramp up. So that's some of the, he can put in the Defense Production Act, but it's going to be tough to find people who are really capable and really able to move it. He'd probably be better off using the Defense Production Act in distribution. And specifically,
we're running out of time. I'm getting a text from Dave saying he's got another Zoom call he's got to deal with.
Holy cow, that was fast. Well, I just wanted to show you, I think the way to go about defense production is actually getting the National Guard out with these vaccinator-focused factory sites in a box. And that's what we'll talk about next time.
Traditional four-year students love Lawrence Technological University's thriving campus life. But LTU has always met non-traditional students' needs too. Lawrence Tech offers over 100 degree and certificate programs that can get adult students started or back on track. And most of our classes are conveniently offered evenings at our beautiful Southfield campus or online, so you can balance your social, family, and work life even while you power up your career. Lawrence Tech, where Blue Devils dare.